I'm Scientific Illustrator Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Create's step-by-step Devil Firefish instructional video. In this video I'll be showing you how to paint the Devil Firefish by using Nature Sketch Create's step-by-step painting instructions. First, collect all your materials and make sure they're ready to go. Remember, this is just a sketch. The process is meant to be relaxing. Don't get too caught up if you think you may have made a mistake. Help out this tiny business by clicking that like button, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and checking out naturesketchcreate.com. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. So you'll want to tape the image to the back of the watercolor paper, and when you do that, just make sure you don't cover up any of the lines you plan on transferring. And you take your graphite transfer paper. This can be used over and over again. As you see, I've used this one before. And place it between the transfer image and the watercolor paper. Make sure it's dark side down, light side up. So one side is darker, one side is lighter. Gently press down and then check that the transfer pressure is enough by just tracing over a line anywhere and make sure that it's actually transferring dark enough that you have your graphite transfer paper arranged right so it's actually transferring. If you have the light side down, it will not transfer. And then just go ahead and go throughout and trace over all of the lines. You can use a colored pencil or ballpoint pen to do this, make it a little easier to keep track of which lines you've transferred. And it's meant to be a very relaxing exercise. So put on some music, maybe sit outside and listen to nature, or listen to a podcast, whatever you like, maybe an audiobook. And if you don't get the lines transferred exactly, that's okay. This is just a sketch. It's going to be great. You don't have to finish this all at one time. At any point, you can stop and come back to this again later. And just take your time, relax, and trace over all of the lines to transfer them. Once you think you have all the lines transferred, go ahead and flip the transfer image and the graphite transfer paper up and down. Just hold down one corner while you're doing that. And just flip it like a flip book, moving your eye from one side to the other to check for any missed lines. And if you don't end up getting the lines even now, it's fine. You can draw them in later or just leave them out altogether. I always end up missing one or two at least. And there were a lot of lines with this. Which also makes it extra relaxing. I'm going to go ahead and transfer the common name and the scientific name and just trace the inside of those little black lines for the common name, and I trace right over the scientific name. Then go ahead and remove the graphite transfer paper. Again, you can use it over and over and over, so save that for later use. Remove the tape from the back of the watercolor paper, and then remove the tape from the transfer image as well. And this one doesn't have a lot of paper on it, so I'll reuse it. If you do have a lot of paper and it's not sticky anymore, feel free to throw it away or maybe compost it. Next, take your kneaded eraser and knead it to a light gray spot and use that to lighten up any marks if you want by just pressing it over, or to erase any smudges left behind. Might not remove them completely, but it's a lot gentler on your paper than a regular eraser. And now you can move on to step 2. Step 2, paint in Devil Orange. So mix the Devil Orange by taking 2 drops of the 25H Hansa Yellow Medium. Make sure you shake up these paints before using them. Sometimes the paint pigment does settle and you want to have the full vibrancy of that color. So there's 1, 2 drops. And 1 drop of the 15H Permanent Red. One. Mix that together, adding a little bit of water to it. And you can add water by either pressing on the barrel of your brush or by moving water from your water vessel if you're using a regular paintbrush. There's a little hair on the tip there, so I'm just going to pull that off before I start. Sometimes fuzz gets on paintbrushes. Dab it off on my towel a little bit and then check it out on my test paper to see if it's the right color. Looks good to me. So I'm going to take a little bit to the side, add some water to it. And in this lesson, if you're talking about wet, light color, it's a color mixed in your palette with some water to make it wetter and lighter in appearance. And it's lighter in appearance because it has less pigmentation due to the amount of water with it. So there's more water in it, and so it doesn't show up as dark. I dab it off on my towel, test it out again. That looks pretty good. Dab it off on my towel and I'm going to apply it. And this is the hardest part after you apply all those lines, to draw all those lines in, because you can get confused where these little lines are. There's so many of them. I actually see a place where I didn't draw on a line, so I'm going to just draw that right in. Doesn't have to be exact. And I recommend just starting just one at a time, starting left to right because I'm right-handed, and go through and paint in those lines and take your time. Once you have all those painted in this step, it's not going to be so hard from there on out. Dab off your brush on your towel. And if you don't get some of these lines quite right, that's totally fine. This is just a sketch. I feel like every time I do this, it turns out just a little bit different. My painting is different depending on my mood, how I'm feeling on a particular day. And I think it's important to note that mistakes just make it more individual to you. And you should not let them stop you. And they should be celebrated instead because they're awesome. And just fill in each of these lines like you would a crayon or a marker, just filling it in from your palette when it runs out, kind of like you have a dried up marker, you get a new one. And any point you find you need, you can also refer to your final reference image in addition to your step 2 image. I'm going through this to see some little lines that might make it confusing for me if I don't have them in there. So I'm just adding it in. If you miss a spot or add some paint in where it shouldn't be, don't worry about it, like here. It's not a big deal. So I just went ahead and painted that all in since I got the stripes wrong. And I also missed a line right here and right here, so I painted that in, but that's fine. There's enough paint that's going to be going over it, and it's just going to make it imperfectly perfect. Once you think you've added all of the paint, clean off your brush and move on to step 3 when this is dry. Step 3, paint in Devil Maroon. So first mix the Devil Maroon, take 2 drops of the 10H Venetian Brown. One, 2, and 2 drops of the Indian Red, 17H. 1, 2. Mix it up like you did the previous color, the Devil Orange, adding just a little bit of water, either from your brush or your water vessel, into your palette. Dab it off onto your towel and test it on your test paper. That looks good, and you'll want to go ahead and use this full concentrated color, so we don't need to make the other color. Dab it off onto your towel and then apply it to the stripes like you see in step 3 and some of the spots as well. And this does not need to be exact, it's just an approximate, same general spots, same general areas. It's just important to preserve some of that color underneath. So go ahead and go throughout and add the Devil Maroon. It's going to look a little ugly at this stage, and that's fine. It's all going to come together. That's where, even though I added the orange color to the wrong spot, I can make sure that I add this maroon color to the right spot, and it won't really matter that there's a little orange in that other area. Hopefully this is starting to look a little less confusing to you, and I have a few more spots filled in. If you need to create a finer tip, just roll the tip on your towel. When you have all of the maroon color added, go ahead and clean off your brush. this dry and move on to step 4. Step 4, paint in the Devil Brown. So first, go ahead and mix the Devil Brown, which is just 2 drops of the Venetian Brown. 2. Add a little bit of water to that from your brush. And then you take it to the side after dabbing it off. Make sure you don't have too much color. And then check it on your paper, see if it's the right color. It's just not dark enough. So I'll pick up some more, add it in there, give it more pigment so it's not quite as wet in my palette. Dab it off on my towel and check it out again. Maybe a little darker. Dab it off, check it again. Looks good, and just to compare, here is the darker, more concentrated color. So we're using the wetter, lighter, less concentrated color, which is not that much lighter. Okay, that looks good. Sometimes even just using a color formula and adding the right amount of water can be tricky. So if you'll not have to worry about figuring out the right color when you're learning to paint with watercolor. So I'm just going to add this to the stripes. I'm not going to worry too much about being exact or staying inside the lines, and picking up more color whenever I need it. The messiness of it makes it more unique. So don't worry about that too much. I'm going to preserve some of that white area though, so don't fill it all in. Just paint right over those stripes. And if now I don't feel like this is dark enough again, so I'm going to add a little bit more. Test it out, and then continue. And next, I'm going to add it to these dorsal spiny fins. I'm going to add it to cover the large spots and some of the white areas like you see in step 4's image. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in those spots. Not being real exact, I'm just kind of adding it in a free, messy way. Not going to overthink this too much, just add it in, relax, have fun letting the paint go where it decides to go. Then I'm going to add it to the pelvic fin, like you see in your image. Again, not being super exact or like the image, putting in the same general space. Then adding it to the pectoral fin. I'm going to add it right here to the right of these spiny fins. You fill in a little bit of the white spaces to create a little bit more of a shadow. And if you forgot to add paint to an area, go ahead and go back and add it in there. I think I forgot to add some paint in here, but I will go back and add it. Once this is dry, it's totally fine. Or you can add it now and just show what that looks like. So it's a little wet, but it's mostly dry, so it'll bleed just a little bit into those wet areas. It'll mostly stay because it's mostly dry. I'll get one spot. So if it's still wet on the paper, it kind of bleeds a bit. And then I needed to add it to these spots here, so it's just going to stay where I put that paint anyway. I need a little bit more brown in here. You can test it to make sure it's dark enough. Maybe a little bit more. And then I'm going to finish this up. Just kind of adding it here. Again, not being super exact, just letting that paint fall where it falls. And if I missed anything, that's okay. Also going to go ahead and add it to the eye, preserving that center space. I'll clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to step 5. Step 5, paint in Devil Orange and Red. And in order to check that your painting is dry, if you're not sure, just dab your finger on top and don't wipe your finger across while it's still wet. It will make a big streak, so just dab your finger to check. So go ahead and pick up a little bit of that Devil Orange we used in step 2. I think I'll need to add a little bit more pigment to that and test it out again. Kind of ran out. Looks good. And we're just going to add a little bit more of this. It adds a bit of a highlight. And just going to add it all over to all of the stripes. And it's okay for some of it to get into the white areas. So I'm just adding it over, kind of like we did with the brown one. And just adding it in the same general spot, not being too exact at all. Cleaning off my brush, and then I'm going to mix the Devil Red, which is just 2 drops of the permanent red 15H. And I'm going to use kind of a wetter, lighter version of this. I'm just going to take a little bit of that color, bring it to the side, and add some water. Dab it off on my towel and test it out. And that looks like the right color. And I'm just going to add that to the stripes on the body, head, and add it sparingly to the bottom fins. So again, not worrying too much, and this is already dry. You shouldn't have to wait for it to dry unless you have added a lot of water from your palette to your painting itself. And that happens if you don't dab your brush off onto your towel before applying it to your painting. Every time I paint, my painting turns out just a little bit different. Because I feel a little different every day. See things just a little bit different. Once you have all the Devil Red added, let this dry and move on to step 6. Step 6, paint in Devil Deep Brown. So mix the Devil Deep Brown, just 2 drops of the sepia, 21H. It's okay if you get a little bit of smudges from your painting, but you can prevent that by using your transfer image while you're working on adding the paint to the image. One, 2. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that and add it to the side, like we did with the Devil Red. Test it out. It looks like the right color. Pick up a little bit more, dab it off onto my towel, and then I'm going to apply it, and it doesn't look like I have anything on my hand. But I do run the risk again of adding paint onto the side from my hand or my paintbrush because I don't have it protected. So you may want to use your transfer image to protect your painting while you're working on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this first to the dorsal spiny fins, and I'm going to add that in the spaces you see in step 6, and also your final reference image. If it's too dark, just dab it off onto your towel to get rid of some of that paint pigment. And if it's still too dark, just remix again. Adding a little bit more water, checking it out. Maybe some of that pigment flowed while I was painting. That looks a bit better. Maybe a little light. Dab it off on your towel before painting again. This does not need to be exact, just an approximate placement and color. And then I'm going to add it sparingly to pelvic fin here and the pectoral fin and the chin, just like you see in step 6 in your final reference image. Again, like before, placement does not need to be exact. And then I'm going to clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to step 7. Step 7, add ink lines. So use the smallest micron, the 005 or 005, and this has the smallest little black tip here. And you want to use it to redraw all of the lines except for the spots that you find throughout. Go ahead and use it to draw in the outline of this pelvic fin and draw in some horizontal lining as well. You can add the little spots on soft dorsal fin and the caudal fin and the anal fin, but it would be easier to do that with the 01 micron. Also add in the common name and scientific name at this time if you transferred those. So go ahead and go throughout and add those lines. And you can redefine some of the lines if you need to, depending on where the paint landed. So you can draw on the outside of that paint or the inside of where that paint landed. And you can use your final reference image, 7A, or your transfer image for reference for placement. You might notice I'm kind of turning my pen while I draw. That allows me to get the tip that hasn't been used recently, and it's a little bit wetter. Sometimes you're drawing over the paint and the pencil, since it's such a fine tip, can dry out just a little bit and make it so that the ink is not coming out as much as I'd like. And you can use your transfer image to protect your painting while you're doing this if you like. Maybe your hand might have some oil in it, leaving some smudges. Or some paint on it from the previous step. If your pen is getting clogged every once in a while, you can just write over and turning your pen around. Make sure you get the whole tip onto some paper, and that should get most of the pencil or watercolor that it picked up. Getting these lines in, so satisfying because you'll really see everything coming together, leaving that ugly stage. Next, we'll add the 01 lines. Hopefully you're finding this process to be very meditative and relaxing. Like with the transfer image process in step 1, make sure to put on a podcast, some music, maybe sit outside and listen to nature, and just relax. So I'll add the 01 black micron lines, and I'll use that to reline and thicken the line of the scientific name, to thicken the lines of the anal fin, soft dorsal fin, and the caudal fin. I'll add these little spot lines as well, these little dots in there, and I'll outline the right side of each of these dorsal spiny fins. I'll fill in this black area of the eye and define the eye a little bit more. I'll outline the head and the mouth, these little appendages, and you can refer again to your final reference image, your transfer image if that helps, and your image for 7A. Let's go ahead and go throughout and draw in those lines. Placement of these tiny lines here don't have to be exact, just to get them the same general space. From research I saw that there's some spots and lines that are straight, some that are a little curved, some of them where they're on this lined spiny area here, but also in the softer area in the middle. If you have some lines that you want to straighten up, you can just kind of thicken them. This is just a sketch, it doesn't need to be exact. It's just a representation of this animal. Lastly, use the 08 black micron to add some thicker lines. Please be careful, this does smudge before it's dried, and so make sure not to run your hand over it right after you use it. So use it to fill in the common name, to outline the pelvic fin, pectoral fin, the forwardmost appendage here, above the eye, the outside of the eye, operculum lines, and the chin lines. These right side of the dorsal spiny fins as well, and anywhere else that you think needs to be a little bit thicker to stand out. Just make sure you have some line variation, because that'll make it look a little bit more 3D and add some more dimension and depth to the image, make it more realistic. Even though we just added a few layers of paint and a little bit of ink. So go ahead and go throughout and add those lines. I think I like the way this looks. If you feel like you need to add a little bit more ink or a little bit more watercolor, you can do that. Just don't get too carried away. This is just a sketch. Also make sure to let the ink and watercolor dry on your paper before adding more to the same spot. We're done. Great job, and keep practicing. You have just created a painting that only you could do. Next, you have some options of what to do with this. You can punch holes in it, add it to your sketchbook, send it in the mail to brighten someone's day, just as is like a postcard. and you can frame it, display it around your house. Also, make sure to share it on our Facebook fan art page. We'd love to see it. And use the hashtag NatureCreateArt to have it featured on our social media. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you had fun, had a chance to relax a little. Make sure to check out naturesketchcrate.com to shop for future crates. Click the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and keep practicing.